Hi, I'm talking about 3 top ways of getting distance from emotional pain, emotional distress. But first, why do we even need to think about getting distance from emotional distress? Well, it's something that we all intuitively recognize, or we might not consciously recognize it. Distress, pain, discomfort they exert a gravitational force. They kind of suck us into them. So the more distressed you feel, the more stressed you feel, the more fear you feel, the narrower your attention gets, and therefore the less of the world that you see, and the bigger the problem appears in your mind. So I like to think of it in terms of perspective, right? Something which is close seems bigger. Something which is far away seems smaller. Because emotional distress sucks you into it, the emotional distress looks bigger and bigger and bigger, and therefore occupies more and more of our mind. And that is what I like to call swimming in a pool of distress, swimming in a sea of distress. So you're swimming in this pool of distress, and that's basically the whole of your experience. I am in a pool of distress. Nothing else captures my attention. All of my experiences, like experience from within this pool of distress. So when I have people in my consulting room, I grab a book, and I stick the book on the wall, and I go, okay, put your nose on the book. What do you see? And they say, nothing. Well, obviously, right? Because you've got your nose on the book. You can't focus. That is the point at which you are completely in the pool of distress, and the problem is huge in your mind, is huge in your visual field. Now I say, okay, hold the book there, right? So we put the book there. Now take 3 steps back. Take 3 big steps back. And they take 3 steps back, and I've got the book sort of on the wall there. I say, now what do you see? They say, I see the book. Yeah, and? I see the wall, yeah, and the whiteboard, and the door frame, yeah, okay, and the picture. Okay, now you see the big picture. So we can physically take 3 steps back to see the big picture. Now we have the book. I'll put that back. Now we have the book in a wider picture, in a bigger picture. The book therefore looks smaller, and the picture frame, if you like, looks bigger. Now I have people genuinely do this. I say, okay, during the day, when you start to feel like you're being sucked into the emotional problem, or you feel the stress rising, and I would normally say like, 0, no stress, no anxiety, no kind of like really negative feelings at all, and 10 is as bad as it could be. If you get to like 3, then you're starting to get sucked into emotional distress. You say to yourself, take 3 steps back to see the big picture, and you literally take 3 steps back, because an action, really reinforces the metaphor. You take 3 steps back and you go, okay, this problem looks large, but actually in the bigger picture, this problem will also pass. This seems like a big thing, but you know what? In the bigger picture, in context, I've done this sort of thing numerous times. Okay, so let's use an example. I've got to drive down the motorway, and I'm anxious. I feel really anxious about driving down the motorway. Okay, take 3 steps back to see the big picture. Take 3 steps back. What's the big picture? I feel anxious about driving down the motorway. What's the bigger picture? I've driven down the motorway hundreds of times, and it's okay. Okay, so I feel a bit anxious, but actually I've done it hundreds of times. So the bigger picture is I'm very practiced at it. Or I've got to go and teach a class of kids, and they're a really unruly class, and I feel like I'll lose control of the class, and it's all going to go horribly wrong, and I'll get sacked. Okay, take 3 steps back to see the big picture. What's the bigger picture? I've taught hundreds of classes, and they are an unruly class, but you know what? If I give them control over me, then it's all going to go horribly wrong. But if I retain control by retaining some distance between the emotions and the actual class activity, it'll probably be all right. And it might not be the best experience, but you know what? It's just another day at the chalk face. So we take 3 steps back to see the big picture. That is a nice distancing tool. Now, as with all tools, if you don't use it, it won't work. So the trick is to find opportunities where your stress level, your anxiety level, or your depression level is going up, and before it gets too high, and before you get sucked right into the problem, and then if you're really genuinely here, it can be hard to generate any self-awareness whatsoever, because the closer you get to the problem, it's correlated. The closer the problem looks, the less self-awareness you have about being sucked into it. So you've got to kind of like pull back. And I guess it's a bit like the event horizon on a black hole. You've got to like make something happen before you get over the event horizon and you get sucked into the black hole. And then, you know, it's difficult to get out of a black hole. So find opportunities to practice this. Take 3 steps back to see the big picture, but make sure you start to pay attention and you take the steps back before you get sucked into the black hole and the problem itself exerts so much gravitational force that it's hard to escape from it. Now, much of our life is spent on autopilot. Vast amounts of our time are on autopilot. Autopilot is really useful. I mean, I'm not suggesting it's a bad thing, except if you've set your autopilot to take you places you don't want to go, such as depression, anxiety, stress, and panic, your autopilot will take you there, but you don't want to go there. So what do we need to do then, right? We need to change the autopilot's direction. We need to reprogram the autopilot. So I guarantee that any negative experience that you're having that you don't want, but you find yourself there and you go, I don't want to be here, that's autopilot. So when you're fully on autopilot, I'm going to call you, and I don't mean this to be an insult, I'm going to call you a mindless robot. Because in principle, you are mindless and you are progressing down a path you don't want to take. For many people, mindless robot's fine as long as it's taking them to the place that they want to go. And the truth is, you can't be conscious all the time. It's just, well, you just can't. It's rock hard. It's very, very difficult to be conscious even a little bit of the time. So we're on autopilot. If we're going somewhere we don't want to go, we have to change the programming of the autopilot. How do we do that? Well, if mindless robot is where we're at, we want to be mindful actor. And by mindful actor, I don't mean Charlie Sheen. I mean that we mindfully, we consciously act upon the world, right? So we consciously do things that get us closer to our destination, to the places that we want to go. Mindless robot will take you to places that you don't want to go because that's what it's programmed to do. And if you're watching my videos, I guess mindless robot takes you to places you don't want to go. Therefore, to change your programming, you have to become mindful actor. But when you're a mindful actor, what does that mean? Well, it means that you can consciously do things that are useful to you, that will contribute to the reprogramming of your autopilot. So let's have a think about this. Let's imagine that you have had times in your life where you felt resourceful or strong or resilient or on top of things or successful. Let's just imagine that you've had times in your life like that, and I'm sure that you have because everybody has. It can be anything at all, it doesn't matter. But I'd like you to imagine yourself back there where you feel successful, you feel on top of things, you feel that things are going how you want them to go. And I want you to think about 3 things that you did that took you to that place. 3 things that you did that contributed to that feeling of being successful or on top of things. And it could be things like, you know, examples would be, I really worked hard. Okay, that would be an example. I was really interested in what I was doing. I was passionate about what I was doing. I was really engaged. I was being creative. Okay, that could be one. I had lots of social life. I had lots of friends. I was meeting people all the time. I was talking to people. I was getting out and about. Okay, so those are just 3 examples that you might have, that you might think contributed to you feeling on top of things whenever. Now, that was then. But let's say that now you're in mindless robot, because mindless robot's taking you the way you don't want to go. You're in mindless robot. What does your mindless robot do, or what do you do in mindless robot that gives you the experiences you don't want? Well, I don't go out much. I don't talk to people. You know, I don't really have any social life. Okay. I don't reply to emails. You know, I don't pick up the phone. I always let it go to answer phone, and then I see who's called. So I'm basically call screening. Okay. Not really talking very much to my partner and family. I'm a bit reclusive, a bit like cut off, a bit shut off. Okay. I'm feeling like a failure, so I'm not really exposing myself to any work at work. You know, I'm trying to like hide a little bit, trying to avoid taking on any new jobs, just really waiting to get found out. Okay, so there's 4. I want 3. So in mindless robot, those would be 3 things that you're doing that mindless robot is making you do every day that contributes to the journey that you're on. So Mindless Robot is making you do these things, and that persists in you carrying on this journey, this negative journey. But in other times, you've been able to do different things, and that's contributed to a different outcome. So in Mindful Actor, I want you to find opportunities in your day to do, let's say, these three things or other things that we could recognize would be useful to do. Okay, so I used to exercise a lot. Now I don't exercise at all. Okay, in Mindful Actor, we might go, okay, you know, I need to start thinking about mindfully exercising. I need to start doing some exercise. Okay, that would be a thing. So I would suggest with everything, almost everything in psychological change, the hard part is remembering to do it. So I would suggest that you set an alarm or a buzzer if you've got a smartphone, like one of those Fitbit things, anything that you can set a timer on. And every hour, let's say for 8 hours a day, or every waking hour, on the hour, you wake up to Mindful Actor. Okay, so a buzzer goes off and Mindful Actor switches on. You go, okay, what can I do now that would be useful to me to change my program? What can I do now that would be useful to do something different? Because autopilot is massively practiced. So Mindless Robot is massively practiced. Mindful Actor, not so much, not nearly so much. And so we've got to put some effort into it until Mindful Actor and those actions that you practice in Mindful Actor bed in and become the new normal. Look, the truth of it is this. Whichever path you're on in life right now, it's not a path you have to be on. I mean, we could reverse it, right? You could be doing great right now, but it doesn't mean to say it's always going to be great. You could be doing, you feel like you're doing really poorly right now, depressed, stressed, anxious, panicky. Yeah, but it doesn't have to be that way. It might be how it is, but unless we put some effort into it, it won't change, it will persist. Being a mindful actor gives you, let's say, 8 opportunities in 8 hours or 16 opportunities a day to do something different. And in those mindful actor moments, you have the possibility of choice. And choice is really important because choice gives you control. Mindless Robot, you have no choice. That's basically it. Mindful Actor, you have the possibility of choice. You might not always get it right, but at least you can do something in that moment that contributes to a different program, if you like. Now, I Googled how many thoughts you have in a day. And the general answer is between 12 and 80,000 a day, let's say. Okay, so wide variability, but a fair bit of consensus that about 85% of your thoughts are negative. So you're far more pessimistic, self-defeating, self-critical than you might imagine. Okay, so we're more affluent now than we've almost ever been, right? And yet depression and anxiety are on their increase. A possible explanation for that is that 85% of our thoughts are negative. Now, imagine this. You're standing at a bus stop and a bus comes along and you look at the bus and it says it's not going to where you want to go. It's going in the opposite direction. Do you get on the bus or do you wait for the next bus? You wait for the next bus, right? You don't get on a bus that's not going where you want to go. Okay. Buses are now thoughts. A negative thought's coming along that says, I am completely useless. Do you get on that thought and ride that thought for a journey and let that thought occupy your mind? Or do you let that thought go and wait for a better thought? Well, if I put it like that, you'd be crazy to get on a negative thought, right, that says I'm useless. Hang on, here's another one. I am a failure. You're going to jump on that thought and let that thought occupy your mind for a while and go on a journey with that thought and perhaps narrate it, create a story. I'm a failure. Well, this is why I'm a failure. This is why I'm useless. Yeah. You know, I've had a good 15 minutes on that bus, that thought bus, and I really feel like a failure. Are you going to do that? Or are you going to wait for the next thought to come along? Well, when I put it like that, it doesn't make sense to jump on the negative thoughts, does it? To ride them, to narrate them, to make sense of them, to give them some space in your mind. But that's exactly what we do. Because we don't realize many of our thoughts are negative, because we don't have emotional distance from them, we tend to ride these negative thoughts, and that then drives our mood down. It makes us feel unsafe, it makes us feel panicky. So what we need to do is to what we need to do is to recognize negative thoughts, and we need to make a choice to wait and not jump on them. So we need to get some distance from them, right? We need to say, actually, this is a negative thought, and therefore I am not going to jump onto it. I'm going to let it drive past, wait for the next thought. Now, it's really easy to generate negative thoughts. I'm useless, I'm a fraud, I'm a failure, it's all going to go horribly wrong, I'm never going to get any better, no one cares about me, I'm going to die alone and in poverty. You know, there's a quick 8. What's a positive thought? I mean, that's a negative thought, so the opposite's positive thought, right? What's a positive thought? It's a bit more tricky, isn't it? Because positive thoughts are just fairly, genuine positive thoughts that are true are fairly mundane, right? I'm a good person. Okay. I have a few friends. Okay. You know, I work and pay my taxes. Okay. I'm a decent enough fella. Okay. Yeah. It's not fantastic. I am a failure is really kind of like, you know, it's a big thing. Whereas I'm a decent person. Well, yeah, okay. So if we're going to resist getting on the negative thought bus, what are we going to occupy ourselves with whilst we're waiting for another bus? Okay. Now I suggest that we create ourselves a positive thought. Now, when I say positive, I don't mean I am going to be a Hollywood superstar. You know, that's just craziness, right? A mild superstar, but not a Hollywood. So no, we don't want anything that's too superlative, because that then just gets the inner critic going. So let's create an alternative positive thought that is more or less, well, it's true, but we can more or less believe it. Because just because things are true doesn't mean we believe them. And I was thinking about something like this, you know, I can move forward. Now, that's always true for everybody, because we're always moving forward. The direction that we move in, of course, is to a degree our choice, but we can always move forward. So a negative thought comes along, I'm a failure. You decide not to get on that thought, but instead you say, you know what, I can always move forward. And always moving forward is making a decision not to ride that negative thought bus. Now, this is a mindfulness activity. Okay, this is a mindfulness kind of position. The hard part about mindfulness is remembering to be mindful sufficiently for it to make a difference in your life. So again, I would suggest a really good thing to do is to, let's say, set an alarm or set a buzzer or whatever. So let's say once an hour for like 30 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, some small amount of time. We go, oh, hang on, I've got to remember to be mindful. I'm not riding the negative thought bus. I can move forward. I mean, just something simple like that. Just making that small moment of awakening into mindful actor is really helpful, because after a little while of doing that, after a little while of being mindful actor, it becomes a thing, and you remember just to be mindful actor, you know? Yeah, that's just a negative thought. Actually, I don't need to write that one. Oh, that's the old negative thought taking me to disaster and destruction. I'm not going to disaster and destruction today, if you don't mind. I'm going to wait and go to the beach. Okay, so we've got 3 really good emotional distancing tools and techniques to use. We can take 3 steps back to see the big picture. Genuinely take the steps back to see the big picture. We can practice every hour, just for a few moments even, to be a mindful actor instead of a mindless robot. And we don't need to ride the negative thought bus. Thoughts are only thoughts. We don't need to jump onto them just because they're negative. If you jump onto a negative thought bus, it will take you to disaster and destruction, let's say, in principle. But a negative thought will also suck you into it, and it will make you feel more upset and more distressed. If we retain some distance, and if we say, you know what, I can move forward, then we're remaining and we're not allowing the negative thought just because it turns up to suck us onto the bus and drive us off to some horrible place. So I hope you found these tools interesting. The important thing is always to practice. Practice, well, as I like to say, effort equals outcome. The more you practice, the more benefit you'll get from them. And then you'll feel more in control of your life. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen.